What is going on, guys? Crowder here, and I am here to give you the best Fortune's Keeps loadouts, settings, and perk packages to help you guys out while you're playing some Resurgence. And to really quickly run through some settings, because we've already done so many settings videos, we're going to go through all the graphic settings, controller settings, and so on and so forth, so you guys are all set up. There are some new settings that we're about to go through, so some of this is worth mentioning, and of course, every season there is some settings that kind of change just in case they do an update or whatnot. But really quickly, to run through our display settings, you're going to see right here, none of this is that crazy. Your refresh rate should obviously be as high as possible to whatever monitor you are using. Same thing with your resolution. Whatever your resolution of your monitor is, you should obviously be playing on it. I play on 1440p, so this is the 1440p right there. And then the restart shaders and all this stuff, this is all normal. My brightness is 55. Depending on the monitor brightness and just like what your monitor looks like, you can kind of just figure it out from there. I think 55 to 60 is usually what I play on, no matter what monitor I am on. But that is the brightness settings that I play on. And then I do play on NVIDIA, low latency, on plus boost. And then if you keep going down here, none of this stuff really matters. I have the eco mode as custom, and then I have everything off, unlimited. And now this is a newer setting, which is the menu render resolution. I have it on native just because I make YouTube videos, but at the same time, you can put it on optimal. It doesn't really kind of change too much. And then everything else, again, focus mode 0, pause game rendering off. And then HDR, I do have off. Let's move over to quality. And the quality is where some stuff does matter a lot. And really quick disclaimer, first of all, if you're liking this kind of video or you like this kind of content, drop a like button. I'd really appreciate if you are enjoying the video. And then, of course, with these, it's all going to be settings that are good for FPS, but also so your game doesn't look like crap, I guess. So a lot of these settings are not going to be something where this gives you the max FPS, but if you want the max FPS, you just lower some of the settings, and I'll kind of get there when we get there. But graphics preset, we're going to have the 1440 100 resolution. Always play on 100 render resolution. I don't use dynamic resolution. Upscale sharpening. Always play on fidelity cast. And I always have it set to 90 for the strength. It just makes everything look a little bit cleaner. And then if you keep moving forward, you're going to have the ray tracing. I do have off. My VRAM scale target, I have at 70 or 60. Usually the 60 to 70 range is where my game does not stutter. Some people have it like higher towards the 90s. I personally have stutters on my PC when I have it at 90. I don't really know why. So if your game is experiencing stuttering, just make sure you're turning it down like your 60 or your 70 range. I play at 70 and it's really good for me. I have variable rate shading off. NVIDIA DLSS frame generation, I do have off as well. This could be good for some frames, but this also does cause input lag, so do not have this on whether your frames get better or not. I'd never think input lag is worth it. And then moving on to the textures, this is what I was kind of talking about before. I have these at normal. Sometimes I have these at high, depending on how I'm kind of feeling. If you want the most FPS boost that you could possibly have, you can lower these to very low and low. Your game is going to kind of look like crap, which is why I don't really do that. And especially because I have a nicer PC, I definitely can get away with running normal and still having a really good amount of FPS. But if you're not running the best PC, I definitely recommend kind of lowering them depending on what your FPS is or what's comfortable for you. So you can definitely experiment with those for sure. And then definitely turn off your depth of field. That's really bad for aiming. And then again, normal, very low, bullet impacts on, persistent effects off. My shader quality is low. You could turn this to high if you have a better PC. This is going to be a little bit more on your game and your FPS. It does make your game look a little bit better, but I do think that having it low for me actually is just something that I prefer. So I have shader quality low, and then I have off, low texture quality low, and then everything else here is going to be low or off, and it's going to be very, very simple. Nothing has really changed here in these settings that I have from like kind of season 1. So that's why I'm running through them so quickly. And then you're going to move over to the view. Now, this is where it gets interesting because the field of view and the ADS field of view are very, very important when it comes to aiming and then what we're about to get into. If you were playing field of view, I play on 120 now. I used to play on 110. I played on 105. I played on 115. I played on 117. I played on everything. And after further review of testing so many different things, and I'm sure I'll probably still test something in the future, I love 120. It just makes me feel like I'm moving really fast. The visual recoil is absolutely limited, which makes the guns just feel like they're shooting really straight. Now, this also can cause you to just kind of go a little bit freaking cross-eyed and just not be able to see things because the field of view is just so fish-eyed. So if you don't like 120, I think 110 is the perfect medium for Warzone to still have really good visual recoil, but still kind of get that extra, like, you know, field of view advantage. So if you can't play on 120 or it's just a little bit overwhelming for you, I recommend playing on 110 or 105. Those are the ones that I found that I still enjoy a little bit on Warzone while obviously playing. And then moving on, the most important thing right here is ADS field of view. You should never be on independent, in my opinion. I think independent with Warzone with higher FOVs is just super jarring, going from 110 all the way back to the independent kind of ADS, which is just a lot. So this is something that you can kind of get away with in multiplayer if you're playing on a lower FOV. ADS field of view, affected for sure. then obviously weapon field of view wide, vehicle field of view wide, and then motion blur 100% off, film grain 100% off, again other motion blur off, and then first person camera movement 50% at all times. Make sure this is at least. If this is not at least, I don't know how you're playing Call of Duty. It is very shaky, the screen shakes, and it's just really hard to shoot, so make sure that is off no matter what game mode you are playing. And now that we've addressed everything that we've needed to address when it comes to the quality, really quickly, we're going to run through some of my controller settings. I'm not going to go through an in-depth explanation because I've done it in many of videos. If you want to kind of do the how to aims and all that stuff and get into the nitty-gritty of that stuff, definitely go watch a different video. The how to aim one is a really, really good one. But regardless here, I play on controller, I play on tactical, and I do not play flipped. I use a PlayStation 5 controller, which is right here, the Crowder Battle Beaver. If you want to use code Crowder at, battlebeaver.com, right there, boom. And if you keep sliding down here, I use the dead zone inputs of these right here. My left stick is minimum at 3. My right stick is at 6. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you to use your right stick a little bit lower for more responsive aiming. I personally think that when I play on a really low dead zone, it's almost too responsive for me where I almost actually over aim. So 6 is kind of the perfect medium for me with my right stick. And then the left stick max is nice because you can hit that maximum movement at that red line right here instead of having to go all the way to the edge of the stick when you play on auto tactical sprint. So left stick max at 65 is really helpful. If this is too advanced for your controller, you can do it at like 75 or 85 just to have a little bit more of an activation of that tactical sprint. But again, not that crazy of a thing, just what I have them set to. And then when you go to aiming, I play on 6 sensitivity, 6 vertical sensitivity, and my ADS is at 1. If you are not the most skilled player, or you're just a player that just wants to hit their shots a little bit more, or you want to have more of a consistent shot, I would drop this down to 0.8. That is still a really good sensitivity to play on. And I think it's just the perfect medium for everyone playing Call of Duty. At the end of the day, sensitivities are a lot of just personal preference, what works for you. I'm just showing you what I use and what I recommend is for you to try out, and then obviously trying to bump it up, bump it down until you're very, very comfortable. But again, I play on 6.6.1, but 6.6.8 is probably what I would recommend to most people that are playing. And then moving down here, you're going to see that everything else is pretty simple. Aim response curve dynamic. I don't mess with the slope scale at all. I have before. I just don't like it. And then everything else is pretty normal. I play on default aim assist. I've tried Black Ops. It's all the same thing to me right now. And then everything else is pretty easy. And moving over to gameplay, I have automatic tactical sprint, single tap to run, and you can kind of just go through all this. But this is the big thing right here. This one right here, slide and dive behavior. In Warzone Season 2 with Resurgence, they came out with a setting called hybrid, which is tap only to slide and then tap while holding sprint to dive. Now, this is probably the most optimal one that you can play on, which is hybrid. I recommend getting used to it. I have just been way too lazy to get used to it myself. But if I was recommending a setting to get on and play, if you really want to, like, obviously have the best experience when you're able to dive and also slide, but not have that input delay that obviously kind of happens on the tap to slide or tap to dive, I recommend hybrid for all players out there to get used to it. Eventually, I'm probably going to switch to this myself, but since I only have a few hours in the morning to play a day, and I'm just not really in a full-time content stance right now, I have not really made that switch myself, but I do recommend that this is probably the best setting that you should be playing on. But again, if you just do slide only, you can get away with it as well. So I play on slide only right now. I plan on changing the hybrid eventually. And then these are the rest of these settings right here. Nothing too crazy. You're going to see that everything else is pretty normal. And then, with this being said, we have one last thing to show you guys, and then we're going to move on to those loadouts. And this next thing is for you console players. So right now, I play on a PC. I also do play on console a lot of the times on my stream. And when I do play on console, I do not play on PC speaker. When I do play on console, I play on soundbar. And I just made a short that's probably linked with this video that has all the audio settings that I recommend on consoles. Since I'm just not on my console right now, I don't have those settings obviously on. But soundbar is what I would recommend playing on. And then of course the master game volumes, you can see what I have here. Cinematic music volume, not needed. Gameplay music volume, not needed. And then of course dialogue at 50 and effects at 100. I think you can get away with that. But soundbar on console is the best audio setting that you can have. And after stating all those settings for you guys, it is now time to get into the good stuff of perk packages and how to get better at Fortune's Keep with some of these best loadouts that all the best players are using. Now moving on from the settings, the next thing I want to talk about really quick before we get into the loadouts, because I know that's all you guys want to see really, is going to be the perk packages. I made a short form video about it that did really, really well. So let's just explain these perk packages that you're going to pair up with these loadouts, and then we're going to get right into the meta loadouts that you guys all want to see. So right here on your screen is my main perk package that I do run. It is the Double Time, Mountaineer, Tempered, and in High Alert. And this is what I use on Fortune's Keep Ranked, Resurgence that I'm just playing for fun. It does not matter. These are my favorite perks. I think Mountaineer is probably one of the most important perks on Fortune's Keep just because you can kind of jump from about 50 meters without taking really any damage. You don't get that stun when you fall too, so you can actually kind of jump right into the action. And when you're trying to finesse away from people, you are going to be able to use this Mountaineer perk to get away from action, especially when you're trying to stay alive for your team. So I do think that is probably the most necessary perk. But regardless, we're going to run through some perk packages right now. So this is my main one, Double Time for the Tac Sprint. I think that's an absolute must. Mountaineer is probably my favorite perk right now. And now I've been on the fence about Tempered because I do like Tempered, but I also do like Quick Fix. I've been kind of going back and forth. And for some reason, I feel the more I use Tempered right now, the more I'm just kind of liking the Tempered over the Quick Fix part of just kind of Resurgence, but I don't think you can go wrong with either. So if you're not going to use Tempered, you can go to perk slot 3. You can definitely throw on Quick Fix, which is just going to help your health regeneration when you apply the plate or when you get that full kill. And it is just going to make it a little bit easier to kind of regain your health. But they did just do a buff in Season 2 that kind of helps that health regeneration a little bit. That's why I kind of switched to the Tempered. But either way, you're not going wrong with whatever you do. And also, when you do use Quick Fix, there's a chance you find that Tempered vest on the ground that you can actually use as well. So you can kind of have like the Super Soldier combo if you're using that. But at the same time, it kind of is just your preference of your gameplay and how you're playing. A lot of the times right now when you're playing Fortune's Keep Ranked, you don't really need Quick Fix sometimes because you're kind of playing as a team and you're not just going rogue, but regular Resurgence, maybe you want it. But still, you can definitely use perk slot 3, either Quick Fix or Tempered. I don't think anything else is really needed. Cold-Blooded in solos isn't bad if you're just playing your Fortune's Keep solos. Resupply is more of a big map perk in my opinion. And then anything else here is just not necessary. So I would go with number 1 as Tempered, a very close second for Quick Fix, and then my third would be Cold-Blooded only if I'm playing solos. That would probably move up to my number 2 if I was playing solos on Fortune's Keep. But regardless, we have that. And then High Alert is the perk package that everyone should be using. And if you don't think High Alert helps you, there are players that are the best in the world that really need help with hearing things just because sometimes the audio in Fortune's Keep can be a little bit crazy. So if you're not going to use High Alert, you could definitely use Flex. So it kind of depends on your playstyle, your headset, your audio settings. And if you're watching this and you're a console player, I would probably use Flex on console almost over High Alert sometimes just because the console audio compared to PC player audio is ridiculously unfair. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. So regardless, Flex or High Alert, I've been rocking High Alert mainly, but you can definitely get away with Flex too. So either or. And then of course this Mountaineer perk slot, we didn't talk about this enough, but if you're not going to use Mountaineer and you're not that kind of player that's going to be running around and finessing, you're more of that slower player, you kind of want to play a little bit more tactical or just more methodical, you can get rid of Mountaineer. And you can use a bunch of different things. I would recommend Battle Hardened or EOD. Probably EOD because you don't get stunned a lot as much as you will get grenaded or hit with a streak or anything of that sort. Basically, a lot of explosions in Warzone. Not a lot of stun grenades when it comes to Fortune's Keep, at least from my experience. So I would recommend either EOD. And if you're not going to use EOD, then Sleight of Hand is really, really good just because Sleight of Hand, you can just reload faster. But certain guns, it affects more than others. So that's why it's not super consistent. Hence why I use Mountaineer. But I would probably go with the Mountaineer as my number 1, Sleight of Hand as my number 2, and a very close third to second would be my EOD, just depending on the guns I'm using and all that stuff. So yeah, that was just a perk package breakdown. I know a lot of you guys that are watching this actually might need some help with what perks that you guys want to run. So that's everything you need to know when it comes to perks. Now let's pair these perks up with the best loadouts in Fortune's Keep. And starting off with the number 1 assault rifle or just main primary rifle build. I'm going to call this a primary, aka your sniper, your LMG, your assault rifle, your battle rifle, which this is what this is. Basically your number 1 gun, your long range weapon, right? Your primary. I am using the MTZ-762. The TAC Evolvier just got nerfed, but it still is up there. But either way, this MTZ-762 has a really fast time to kill. It is very easy to control the recoil with this specific build. And now if you are not the best player, I'm going to give you another version or 2 of this MTZ build that you can use that will make it a lot easier. But this is what this gun looks like right now. And if you shoot this in the firing range, you are going to see that while I shoot this, the recoil is not that hard to control. Very, very easy. The firing aim stability and the visual shake is not bad, and that is all due to the Bruin heavy support and the compensator. And then the high grain ammo is actually going to make this gun lovely because it actually gets your bullet velocity to around 1100, and it ups that effective damage range just a little bit more, so it kind of makes it a little bit more powerful at those really long ranges. Now, if you're not the best player, but you still want to use this gun, my suggestion would be this exact loadout right here. So you take off high grain because it's definitely not necessary and the gun is still going to be really good. And you throw on the close quarters assault stock because this close quarters assault stock is going to help you with the recoil and the gun kick. And it's still going to be really easy when it comes to Fortune's Keep. You don't really need that bullet velocity. So that high grain ammunition or the high velocity ammunition is probably not going to be super necessary. And you're still going to have a gun that's really easy to control when it comes to just Fortune's Keep gunfights, those medium range gunfights. The recoil on this is going to look something like this. And it's going to be just a little bit less wobbly. Still really easy to shoot. And overall, my #1 pick when it comes to Fortune's Keep. Now, my #2 pick is still going to be the TAC of Valvir. I think this thing is insane. I know they just nerfed it. They really heavily nerfed the 5.56 version of it. But weirdly enough, I already used the 7.62 for my primary kind of version of this. So I didn't really take this nerf super heavily when it comes to the 7.62. And I still think, even though they hurt the recoil on this nerf very recently in the patch notes, I do think this build right here is still really good for recoil, still really easy to shoot, and it has 100 rounds in the magazine. So if you're not the most accurate player, you still have 100 bullets to hit your shots and obviously kind of get those downs and those kills. And this gun's recoil is really, really easy, especially even with high grain. If you see this gun's going to shoot like this, which is fairly accurate. If I take my hand off the trigger, it goes up a little bit at a very slow rate, but it is so easy to control. And of course, even with this being said, if you are still kind of a player that just struggles with recoil or is just not getting it done, especially if you're playing on console, maybe you're not playing on 120 FOV, you have more visual recoil and you want something just a little bit easier, you don't need the high grain ammunition. Once again, you could take off this high grain ammunition and you could put on high velocity, which would be a little bit easier just because if you see the high velocity does not hurt your recoil control like what the high grain does. So if you go to the stats, you can see that high grain actually does hurt your recoil control quite a bit. So again, if you were not as advanced of a player, you don't need high grain. You can just put on high velocity to make it a little easier to shoot. Or if you just don't want high velocity on at all, you can use an optic. I personally think the iron sights on the TAC are really, really good. So what I would probably end up doing is putting on a rear grip for either firing aim stability, just because that firing aim stability sometimes is almost more important than the recoil control. Or you can just put on the response grip, which is going to help your aim idle sway, gun kick control, and on top of that, it is going to help your recoil control. And it's going to look something like this too. Just a very, very, very easy, user-friendly weapon to use that is going to help you shoot straight, no matter what range you're using this weapon. And now moving on to my #3 pick, and this #3 pick is still a very high pick on my list. It is #3, but I still use this gun all the time, and you see a lot of top streamers or pro players or whatever you're watching, they all use this gun still a lot of the time. It is the Ram 7. Now, this gun did get nerfed in Season 2, so the long range kind of drop off is not significant. It does get a little bit weaker once you're past like the 45-50 meter mark. But seriously, Fortune's Keep, a lot of your gunfights are that medium range. A lot of your gunfights are a little bit closer than that. And especially if you're more of a casual player, you're taking fights where you're playing a little bit more passive. You're not beaming someone from 100 meters away anyway. That's why this gun can be good for you. And it is these attachments right here on your screen. This gun still has very, very favorable recoil. And with that recoil, it's going to look something like this. It has that initial jump. And then once you get past that initial jump, it is a very easy gun to use. If you shoot this at the wall, you're going to see this. Watch. I shoot it, not controlling the recoil. It has that initial jump that can get a little bit weird. Right here that you see how like they're a little bit more spread apart. And then as it goes, it just slightly goes up to the right. So all you have to do is pull down a little slightly to the left. So it kind of goes straight up at first, and then it starts going to the right. So all you have to do is pull down straight down and then a little bit to the left. And you can keep this very, very, very still. And it's going to be a very easy gun to use that does drop people within the 40 meter range. So another really good primary for you to use. And my last and final primary is right here on your screen. It is the XRK Stalker. Now, this is good in regular Fortunes for Keep. I don't recommend sniping in ranked because in ranked, it can only do 299 damage no matter what the range is. And that is the same with the Cat. So sniping in ranked cannot be as beneficial when it comes to playing regular Fortunes Keep. Sniping can be very fun, and the XRK Stalker is the closest thing we've had to the Car 98K or the Swiss that we all know and love from Warzone 1, and it is with this build right here. You're going to have a pretty quick ADS here. You're going to have a pretty quick sprint to fire and all that stuff, and the range is going to be nice with this high grain on. You're going to have it all the way up to 75 meters that you can get a one-shot headshot with. So very good weapon, very good bullet velocity, very mobile sniper, and it is very, very fun to use. There's a couple ways you can build this, but this thing just in general, you can see here, it aims in fast. You can do quick scopes with it, and you can just have some fun if you're more of a flashy sniper. Now, if you think this scope is a little bit too zoomed in for you, there's always things that you can change about this build. If you go back into the gunsmith and you look at it, you can take off high ground. You can put on high velocity if you really want. Kind of really up to you. I do think high grain is just way better, But I would take off the no stock and put on a different optic to obviously help you out with the scope that you prefer. It's still going to be really, really quick even without the no stock. And the one thing I can say, if you're not the most advanced sniper, is that the no stock can be a little bit bouncy with the aiming idle sway and just kind of the flinch resistance if you're getting shot at. So if you're someone that's not trying the quick scope, you can either use a different stock on it, you can throw a different optic on it, you can throw a bolt on it. There's so many different ways to build this class, which is really, really nice. But this is what I would start off with and kind of tune this one to however your sniping style kind of goes. And I think you'll find something that really works for you. But this is what I would recommend to any player out there that is playing Call of Duty right now, that are playing regular Fortune's Keep. This build is really, really fun. Of course, if you want to take off that stock for a little bit less idle sway, you can do that. But that is my last primary we're going to go over. Now let's move on to the really fun stuff, the SMG meta. And here you have on the screen, there is going to be the SMG meta. There are 3 SMGs right now that are really, really good. And with the first SMG I want to talk about is going to be the HRM9. Now there is multiple ways to build this for multiple different play styles. Personally, this is my #1 build right here. And the reason why I like the HRM9, I know they just nerfed it, which means they took down some of the range. You can see that effective damage range is only 13 meters. A lot of sub fights in Fortune's Keep are going to be really close. But the thing with this weapon that every other SMG right now in the meta does not have is, if you look down here and you see it right here, sprint to fire speed is 81 milliseconds. Now keep that in mind when I'm going through the next 2 SMGs, because that doesn't seem like anything super significant. But when you were playing against good players, and especially if you were more of an advanced player, you actually can get your sprint to fire speed at 81, which is going to affect how quickly you actually are able to shoot off of your tactical sprint, right? So if I'm sprinting around and I'm doing this and I obviously slide, I can basically get my hip fire shots off immediately and almost shoot as soon as I see my enemy. And that could be the difference of milliseconds that you actually see your opponent and actually start hitting them with bullets, especially since this gun is really, really strong, that a lot of other SMGs just don't have. And this kind of reminds me of like what the sprint to fire was in Warzone 2 back on Al-Mazr with like the MP5 or the Lachman. A lot of those guns had really good sprint to fire speeds, and that was really important in those close range gunfights, because if you're running around in Fortune's Keep and it's getting mixy, if you kind of, headbutt each other and you have, 2 people staring at each other and they have a Ram 7 or they have an AMR 9 and you have the HRM 9 up close, even though those guns kill like, 20 milliseconds faster up close sometimes, you're going to actually start shooting them before they can even react and shoot you because of that sprint to fire speed. This is more of an advanced stat that advanced players kind of care about a little bit more. So if you're not the most advanced player, then you don't have to do this, of course. But that is the reason why the HRM9 is my #1 right now. And as I said, you can build this a couple different ways. So we have this build right here. Another popular build is this build right here. The only thing that changes, I do have the high grain ammunition on it, which is right here. And you can see that it kind of bumps up that range a little bit and that bullet velocity. It's going to hurt your recoil a little bit. But if you were more of an advanced player, you should be able to handle this. A lot of the best players in the world right now, all the sweats are using kind of this build too. I don't think this build is like the most relatable build, just because some of the people that are going to be watching this video aren't the best COD players. So you kind of want to use something in the middle of what I just recommended. And then there's one other way to build this gun, and that build is right here. Now this is going to be a little bit more of a build that has the longer range. And you can see here again, the effective damage range is all the way up to 16, which on Fortune's Keep, there's going to be a lot of gunfights that you run into that are just outside that 13-meter range, but you don't want to use an assault rifle for that, of course. So this is still a really, really good build. I want to say some of the players that are top 250 still use this, and the iron sight on this is we all know and love it. It's the Graz iron sight, and it's just so nice. So again, very good iron sight, very easy to shoot, and is still something that's going to kill your enemy very, very quickly at a little bit longer of a range than some of the builds that you can do with this. So this is just a different one if you want to try it out. If you don't really like those first iron sights, test this out and see what you like. And even with this being the long range build, you can still see that the sprint to fire speed is 93 milliseconds, which is still faster than almost any other SMG right now. And it's still pretty crazy. So this gun is definitely just like a little bit of everything. It's got everything that you need. That's why I think this is probably the #1 gun. But the other 2 guns we're about to talk about are insane for other reasons. Let's do it. And for the #2, I'm going to put this at the AMR 9. I think #2 and 3, these next 2 guns I'm going to show you, are completely even for me for so many different reasons. Now, the thing with the AMR 9 that I do not love is that if you go to the stats and you look at the stats, the sprint to fire speed is at a 151. And I am using basically the fastest version of this gun that you can possibly use. I have the no stock attachment on it, or the buffer tube, which is like the equivalent of the no stock. And it's still just a slower SMG. Now, this thing does have the fastest time to kill all the way up to 22 meters, which is nuts. And if you put a suppressor on this, it gets even longer. But regardless of that, this gun is still going to be really good. If you're more of a casual player that isn't going to be a super fast, like sliding around and getting cracked, and you're kind of more of an ADS, like holding your pre-aim kind of player, this gun is going to be really good. Now, this build that I have right here is going to be a little bit more of the advanced build, I would say, just because it's going to have a little bit more kick with that buffer tube and just obviously, you know, trying to make it as quickly as possible just because I'm more of a sweaty player myself. But if you don't want to have more of the advanced option like this, you can do something like this, which is just going to take off that buffer tube and put on the high green ammunition. You're going to have even more range to drop your enemies at just crazy ranges. If you go to the stats right here, it actually goes all the way up to 26 meters. This is basically becoming an AR at this point, but it's going to hurt your sprint to fire speed. And of course, again, if you're not sliding around and sprinting around and kind of getting all crazy with it, this gun right here might be the one for you. You can see here, if I go into the firing range and you have an optic, which is a really good sight, it's not going to have that much recoil, and you're just going to be able to drop people from really far ranges and just have a really good time with this gun. This does have like the fastest time to kill out of the 3 SMGs. Not by much, but it is the highest performing SMG when it comes to damage. And these 2 builds that I just gave you right there are going to be pretty insane. So this is something that I recommend trying out if you're not really enjoying the RAM or the HRM9. And speaking of that RAM, let's give you some loadouts for that one. And for the 3rd SMG in the meta, the Ram 9. This is the new SMG in Warzone. This gun is really, really fun to use. I use this gun probably almost the most just because the mobility and the strafing speed is really fun. And there's a bunch of different things you can do with this gun. But right here is my main build that I absolutely love. Now, this has the 2nd fastest time to kill. It has a little bit faster than the HRM9, but it does not have as fast as the AMR9, and they're basically identical, though. We're talking a couple milliseconds difference here. But the thing with the Ram 9 is that it does not have the amount of range that the AMR9 does or the HRM9 does. So right here, you can see the effective damage range is 11, and that is because I do have high grain ammunition on it, and it's still not going to have that crazy range. So this is more of like a very up-close gun. And if you just take one last look, you see the sprint to fire speed on this build is 140 milliseconds, which is not even comparable to the HRM9 when it comes to being a super sweat. So this is not my favorite just because I feel like when I'm playing at the highest level against the best players, I really like that sprint to fire speed. But if you're not someone that cares about that, this build is insane. And if you want to see what it looks like when it shoots, it looks exactly like the Ram 7, but just in SMG form. It's a very easy gun to control. In the firing range, sometimes you get a little bit more visual shake, but when you're actually in the game, that like weird visual shake that I'm getting right now is something that you're not going to see. And it's going to be a really fun weapon to use. I definitely think this is the best build without a doubt when it comes to this gun. But if you don't care about ranges and you want to hit your shots more, you could take off the high grain ammunition and you could either put on a barrel, or you can put on a stock, or you can put on a stock like the gun kick control stock right here with the 3.4 pad, and you're going to have a gun that looks like this, which is just even easier when it comes to recoil and just easy to shoot and hit your shots. But I definitely think having that extra range when it comes to the ammunition of using high grain is going to be really, really useful because this gun gets really weak really quickly after that effective damage range. So that's the one thing that sucks about this weapon, but everything else about this weapon I do like a lot. So that would be another way if you want to kind of build it in a more of a casual sense. It's right there. So those are your settings, your perk packages, and the best Fortune Keeps loadouts that I can give you guys right now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like the video, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.